I cried while I signed the papers. I want you to know that before anything else. I did not smile sweetly. I did not have a clever plan. I was 21 years old, sitting at my parents' dining room table on the morning of my birthday, with a cake my mother had bought from the grocery store still in its plastic clamshell on the counter. And I was signing over $4.2 million to my older brother because my parents had told me, in a calm and reasonable voice, that I was not the kind of person who could be trusted with that much money. I was not the kind of person who could be trusted with that much money. That had been the exact phrase. My father said it twice. My mother nodded. My brother Theo sat across from me at the table, staring at the wood grain with his hands folded in his lap, the way he had been sitting since he was 8 years old whenever our parents were doing something he did not have the courage to interrupt. The inheritance had come from my grandmother. Her name was Margot Dubois. She had died 6 months earlier, in the small house outside Boston where she had lived for 40 years. She had left me everything, in a will my parents had not seen until after the reading. When my father had heard the number, he had not spoken for almost a full minute. When he had finally spoken, he had said, "Well, that is going to need to be reorganized." 3 months of conversations followed. My parents told me, in many small ways, that I was not equipped to handle that kind of money. They told me my brother was the financially responsible one. They told me Theo was about to start a major position at a bank in New York, and that the money would be put to better use under his stewardship. They told me my grandmother had been sweet but old, and not entirely clear-headed at the end. They told me she had probably meant for the money to be split between us. They told me 100 different versions of the same sentence, which was the sentence my father finally said out loud at the dining room table on the morning of my 21st birthday. I was not the kind of person who could be trusted with that much money. I signed every page. I cried while I did it. My mother handed me a tissue. My father told me I was being mature. My brother did not look up from the table. What I did not know, on that morning, was that my brother was about to spend the next 3 years of his life undoing what was happening at that table. I did not know it because he did not know it yet either. The decision he was going to make, the decision that would eventually end my parents' control over both of us, had not been made in his head yet. It would be made about 90 minutes later, in his own car, in the parking lot of a coffee shop, while he sat with his hands on the steering wheel and stared at his own reflection in the rearview mirror. But that is his part of the story, and I am going to tell it later, the way he eventually told it to me. My name is Selene Aldridge. People who like me call me Saul. I am 24 years old now. I teach middle school art in a small town in Vermont. 3 years ago, on my 21st birthday, I lost $4.2 million in 20 minutes. 3 years later, on a Thursday in November at my parents' Thanksgiving dinner, my brother stood up between the turkey and the dessert and told my parents what he had actually been doing with that money. By the end of dinner, my parents had lost something much more important than money. They had lost both of their children, in the same evening, for the same reason. They simply did not know it yet. Before I tell you what Theo said at that table, hit subscribe. And tell me one thing in the comments. Tell me about a sibling moment that changed how you understood your family. Not a big dramatic moment, a small one. A glance across a room, a text message at the right time, something that made you realize you were not as alone in your own family as you had thought. I read every single comment. Now let me take you back to the morning of my birthday. I want to tell you about my grandmother first because she is the start of all of this. Margot Dubois had emigrated from a small town in northern France in 1962, when she was 19 years old. She had come to Boston with a sister and almost no English. She had worked as a seamstress for 30 years. She had married my grandfather, a kind, quiet man who taught high school French, and they had raised my mother in a small house on a street where every other family had lived for 40 years and knew everybody else's business. My grandfather had died when I was 7. My grandmother had lived alone in the house after that. She had never moved. She had never remarried. She had spent her last years sitting in the small garden behind her house, drinking very strong coffee and reading novels in 3 different languages. I had been the only grandchild who visited her regularly. My brother had been busy. My parents had stopped going after my grandfather's funeral, mostly because my mother and her own mother had a complicated relationship I had never fully understood. Once a month, from the time I was 12 until the day she died, I had taken the bus from my parents' house to my grandmother's house, and I had spent Saturdays with her. We baked, we painted. She showed me her old photographs from France. She told me stories about her sister, who had died young. She taught me French phrases I have not forgotten, even though I have never had a chance to use them. She left me her money because she had been watching the entire time the way my parents talked about my brother in front of me. She had not approved. She had not said anything to my mother about it because my grandmother was not the kind of person who fought about things she could not change. Instead, she had quietly built up a portfolio over 40 years, mostly from her seamstress savings invested in a careful mix of stocks she had picked by reading the newspaper at her kitchen table. By the time she died, the portfolio was worth $4.2 million. She had left it all to me. She had also left a small letter, which her lawyer had read at the will meeting, explaining her decision. The letter said this: "Solène, this money is yours. I have left it to you and not to your brother because Theo will be fine without it. He has already been chosen. You have not been. I want you to know that being unchosen is not the same as being unworthy. It is just slower. Some flowers bloom late, some bloom in the shade. You have been growing in the shade your whole life, my darling. Now you have a little sunlight. Use it however you want. I am proud of you." My father had been so angry at that letter that he had not spoken at the dinner my mother had hosted that night. He had spent 3 months figuring out how to undo it. By my 21st birthday, he had figured it out. The legal mechanism was a voluntary transfer. Because I was an adult, I could not be forced to sign anything. But my parents had been working on me for 3 months. They had told me my grandmother had been confused. They had told me my brother needed a financial foundation for his career. They had told me I was an artist and would not know what to do with that kind of money. They had told me I would be happier without the burden. They had told me, by the end, that signing the papers was actually a gift to myself, because I would not be able to live a normal life if I knew I was sitting on that much money. They had said this last part with what looked like real concern in their eyes. I signed because I was 21 years old and because my parents were the only family I had besides my grandmother who had just died, and because I had been raised in a household where the wrong opinion at a dinner table could mean 3 days of the silent treatment. I signed because I loved them, and because I wanted to keep loving them. I signed because I was afraid of what my life would look like if I refused. After the signing, my mother served the cake. We sang the birthday song. I ate 2 bites. I went home to the apartment I shared with 2 other women, both of whom were finishing their own degrees. I sat on my bed. I did not cry again. I had cried at the table. I had decided on the way home that I was not going to keep crying about it. That night, I made a decision. I want you to remember this decision because it is the decision that mattered, even though I did not know it at the time. I decided that I was not going to spend the rest of my life trying to get my parents to apologize for what they had just made me do. I decided that I was going to graduate, take the teaching job I had already been offered, and build a small life that did not require my parents' approval, money, or attention. I moved to Vermont 2 months after I graduated. I took a job teaching art at a middle school in a town with a population of 9,000 people. The starting salary was $38,000. I rented a small apartment above a hardware store. I bought a used car. I joined a local pottery studio where I worked on my own art 2 evenings a week. I made friends with the other teachers at my school. I made friends with the woman who ran the coffee shop on the corner of my street. I built a life on the smallest possible scale, and I started, very slowly, to be happy. I did not speak to my parents for the entire first year. They called occasionally. I let it go to voicemail. They sent texts. I responded only to the ones that did not mention money or my brother. They invited me home for Christmas. I told them I was traveling, which was a lie. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment, reading a book my grandmother had given me when I was 16. It was the best Christmas I had ever had. Theo called me twice that first year. The first call was 3 weeks after my birthday. He left a voicemail. He said, "Sol, I am sorry. I did not know how to stop it. I should have stopped it. I am sorry. Call me back when you are ready." I deleted the voicemail. I was not ready. The second call was 8 months later, around Easter. He left another voicemail. He said, "Sol, I want you to know I have been thinking about you every day. I am not asking for anything. I just want you to know that the version of me who sat at that table is not the version of me anymore. When you are ready to talk, I am here. Whenever that is. No pressure, no expectations." I did not delete that voicemail. I kept it. I listened to it about once a month, late at night, the way you listen to old music from a hard time. I did not call him back yet, but I started thinking about him differently. I want to switch perspectives now because I cannot tell you the next part of this story without telling you what Theo was doing for those 3 years, even though I did not find out until November of last year. Theo had not gone home from my birthday signing. He had driven himself to a coffee shop in our town. He had sat in his car in the parking lot for almost 2 hours. He had not gone inside. He had stared at himself in the rearview mirror. He had thought, for the first time in his adult life, about who he had been at that table. He had been 24 years old. He had just received $4.2 million from a sister who did not deserve to lose it. He had said nothing while it happened. He had stared at the wood grain. He had let our parents do what they had been planning to do for 3 months. In the parking lot, he made a decision. He drove home. He did not tell our parents. He did not tell his fiancée, Camille, who he was going to marry that fall. The decision was simple. He was not going to keep the money. He was not going to give it back to me yet because he could see, even from inside the situation, that I was too damaged to be able to handle a sudden reversal that would put me back in our parents' line of sight. He was going to hold the money in trust, invest it conservatively, and give it back to me when I was ready, in a way our parents could not interfere with. He talked to a friend at his bank the next day. The friend was a man named Olamide Akande, who worked in private wealth management and who had become Theo's quiet mentor over the previous 2 years. Theo told Olamide what had happened. Olamide listened without interrupting. When Theo finished, Olamide said, "You have 2 choices. The first is you can give it back to her now. She is going to lose it again because your parents are going to find a way to take it back. The second is you can build something around it, something they cannot reach, something that grows, and when she is ready, you give it to her in a form they cannot undo." Theo chose the second option. For 3 years, Theo managed the money. He did it in a personal investment trust that he had set up with himself as the sole trustee, with my grandmother's letter as the guiding intent document, and with a clause that allowed for the eventual transfer of all assets to me when certain conditions were met. The conditions were specific. The trust would transfer to me when I had been financially independent of our parents for at least 3 calendar years, when I had reached the age of 24, and when Theo had personally determined, through observation and conversation, that I was ready. He did not tell me. He did not tell our parents. He did not tell Camille for almost a year, although when he finally did, she told him she had figured it out because they shared bank statements and she had noticed an unusual investment account. He did not tell anyone else. He grew the $4.2 million to $5.4 million over 3 years, in a balanced portfolio that Olamide had helped him design. Meanwhile, I was teaching art. I was building friendships. I was healing. I had no idea what was happening 8 states away from me. In October of last year, 3 years and 4 months after my 21st birthday, Theo flew to Vermont. He did not tell me he was coming. He drove a rental car to my school. He waited in the parking lot until classes ended. He came in through the front office. He asked the secretary if she could let me know my brother was here. I had not seen Theo in 3 years. The secretary came to my classroom. She told me my brother was in the front office. I felt my stomach drop. I told her I would be there in a minute. I cleaned up my paintbrushes. I took off my apron. I walked down the hall to the front office. He was standing by the window. He was wearing a coat he had not been wearing the last time I saw him. His hair was different. He looked older. He saw me. He did not smile. He just said, "Soul, I needed to come see you. I am sorry I did not call ahead. I was afraid you would say no. Will you have dinner with me? I will fly back tomorrow morning. I just want one dinner." I told him yes. I told him I needed an hour to finish at school. I told him to meet me at the diner on Main Street. We sat in a booth at the diner that night. I ordered a grilled cheese sandwich. He ordered a salad. The waitress brought us coffee. For the first 10 minutes, neither of us could really talk. Theo kept looking at me like he was trying to memorize my face. Then he said, "Soul, I have to tell you something. I have been doing something for 3 years that I have not told you about. I want to tell you tonight. I want to tell you because I am ready, and because Mom and Dad have invited me home for Thanksgiving in 3 weeks, and I have decided that I am going to tell them the same thing I am about to tell you, in front of them, at the table. Before I tell them, I have to tell you. I owe you that. You should not find out from a moment in their dining room." I told him to keep going. He told me everything. The parking lot, the decision, the trust, Olamide, the 3 years of managing the money, the growth from 4.2 to 5.4, the conditions of the trust, the way it had been designed so our parents could never touch it, the way it had been ready for me in a folder in a safe in his apartment in New York since the day I had turned 24 8 months earlier. He had been waiting, he said, until he was sure I was settled. He had been waiting until he could see, in my voice on the phone with our mother, that I was no longer in any danger of being pulled back into their orbit. I want to tell you what I felt while he was talking, because I do not want you to think it was joy. It was not joy. It was something much more complicated. It was the slow rearrangement of 3 years of grief in a diner booth, while my older brother told me he had been undoing the worst day of my life in the background, the entire time, without telling me. I cried. I cried in a way I had not cried since the morning of my birthday. Theo did not interrupt me. He sat there with his coffee cooling, and he let me cry. The waitress came over once to ask if we needed anything. Theo waved her away gently. She left us alone. When I had calmed down, I asked him one question. I asked him why he had not just given it back to me earlier. "Because you were not ready," he said. "Because if I had given it back to you when you were 21, you would have given it back to them. They were too close to you. You needed 3 years to put a wall between yourself and them that nobody could reach across. You did that. I watched you do it. I read the things you posted online about your students. I drove past your school once 2 years ago and saw you in the parking lot with another teacher, laughing about something. I knew, that afternoon, that you were going to be okay. I knew also that I had to wait a little longer, until they could not get to you anymore." I asked him why he was telling me now. "Because you can handle it now," he said, "and because I am ready to stop hiding it. I have been holding this for 3 years. It has been very heavy. I am tired. I want to give it back to you and stop carrying it, and I want to tell our parents that I have been undoing what they did because I think they need to be told. And I think they need to be told in front of family. And I think Thanksgiving is the right time. If you do not want me to tell them at the table, I will not. I will do it however you want. The money is yours either way, starting tonight. The papers are in this folder. We can sign them at this table if you want, and the trust dissolves and the funds transfer to you. But I would like, with your permission, to tell our parents. In their own dining room. With everybody else there." I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "Yes, tell them. I will be there. I want to see their faces." We signed the transfer paperwork that night in a diner booth in Vermont, while a waitress refilled our coffee and the small TV behind the counter played a basketball game neither of us was watching. The $5.4 million became mine again, 3 years and 3 months after I had been told I was not the kind of person who could be trusted with it. 3 weeks later, we went to Thanksgiving. I want to tell you about that dinner because the dinner is the whole point of why I am telling you this story. I drove down from Vermont. Theo and Camille flew in from New York. We arrived at my parents' house within an hour of each other. My mother had cooked. My father had bought wine. The dining room table was set for 8 people because my mother had also invited my Aunt Renata and her husband Greg, who lived nearby. Aunt Renata is my father's sister. She had been at my 21st birthday signing. She had not said anything that morning either. We sat down at the table at 4 in the afternoon. My mother said grace. My father carved the turkey. We ate. We made small talk. My parents had no idea that anything was different. They had not noticed that Theo and I had been speaking again. They had not asked. They had assumed, the way people who do not ask questions assume, that everything they had built was still standing. Around 6 in the evening, after the main course had been cleared and before the desserts came out, Theo set his coffee cup down. He looked across the table at me. I nodded at him. He stood up. "Mom," he said, "Dad, I want to say something to the family. I have been waiting 3 years to say it. I think tonight is the right time." My mother smiled. She thought he was about to make a toast. My father leaned back in his chair. He thought the same thing. Aunt Renata picked up her wine glass. Camille put her hand on Theo's arm briefly and then let it go. 3 years ago, Theo said, you sat my sister down at this table and you forced her to sign over an inheritance that our grandmother had specifically left to her. You told her she was incapable of managing the money. You told her our grandmother had been confused. You told her I would be a better steward of the funds than she would. I sat at that table that morning and I did not say a word in her defense. I have been ashamed of that morning every single day since. I want you to know that before I tell you what I have been doing about it. My father said, Theo, whatever this is, sit down, we can talk about this another time. No, Theo said, we cannot, because I have been doing something for 3 years that you do not know about. The money you made Sol sign over to me has not been mine. It has not been touched for personal use. It has been held in a trust I established the day after I received it, with the express purpose of returning it to my sister when she was ready. The trust has been managed conservatively. The money has grown. I transferred everything to Sol 2 weeks ago. The total amount after 3 years of growth was $5.4 million. It is hers. It has always been hers. It just took some time to get back to her, in a way the two of you could not interfere with. The dining room went completely silent. My mother set down her fork. My father did not move at all. Aunt Renata put her wine glass back on the table without drinking from it. Greg looked at the ceiling, the way some men look at ceilings when they want to be invisible. My father said, "Theo, you did what?" "You heard me," Theo said. You stole from us." "No," Theo said. "I returned to my sister what was hers. You stole from her 3 years ago. I have been quietly correcting it. There is a difference." My mother said, "How could you? How could you do this to us?" Theo looked at her for a long moment. He said, "Mom, I did not do it to you. I did it for Sol. The fact that you are experiencing it as something done to you is your problem, not mine. The money was never yours. It was never mine. It was hers. I have given it back to her." That is the entire story. The rest is the family you and Dad have been running for 40 years, and I am not willing to keep running it with you. My father stood up. He started to say something. Theo cut him off. "Dad," he said, "there is no version of this conversation that ends with you being right. I want you to understand that before you start defending yourself. You forced your daughter on her 21st birthday to sign over millions of dollars our grandmother had specifically left to her. You did it in this room. You did it at this table. You did it knowing exactly what you were doing. You did it because you have spent your whole life teaching us that one of us was worthy and the other one was not, and you needed to stop our grandmother from breaking the story you had built. You did not stop her in the end. You only delayed her. The story you had been telling about your daughter is over now. It is over because Sol built her own story, in Vermont, where you could not reach her. And it is over because I refused to keep being the prop in your version of who was worth what." I had not yet said anything. I had been watching my mother's face. She had gone from confused to furious to something I could not quite name. It was a kind of nakedness. She was looking at her own son, on Thanksgiving, and she was realizing that she did not actually know him anymore. She turned to me. She said, "Solène, did you put him up to this?" "No, Mom," I said. "He came to me 2 weeks ago. He told me what he had been doing. He asked my permission to tell you tonight. I gave it to him. I came here for this dinner specifically because I wanted to be in this room when he said it." "Why?" my mother said. "Why are you doing this to us, Solène?" "Mom," I said, "we are not doing anything to you. We are telling you what has happened. You are choosing to receive it as an attack. That is the whole problem. That has always been the whole problem. You cannot tell the difference between somebody refusing to be controlled by you and somebody attacking you. They are not the same thing. Refusing to be controlled is the floor. It is the minimum. It is what every adult child is allowed to do. And you have spent 30 years treating it like a betrayal." My father was still standing. He sat down. He did not say anything. The dinner ended early. Aunt Renata and Greg made a small excuse and left. My parents did not speak to me or Theo for the rest of the evening. We helped Camille clear the table. We loaded the dishwasher. We packed up the leftovers, which my mother had not offered to send home with us. Theo and I slept at a hotel that night instead of in our childhood bedrooms. My parents did not stop us. We have not been back since. It has been almost a year. My mother sent me a letter 2 months after the dinner. The letter was 4 pages long. It was not an apology. It was a list of all the ways I had hurt her by allowing Theo to do what he did. I read it once. I did not respond. My father has not contacted me at all. Theo and I talk every Sunday. We are slowly becoming the brother and sister we were never allowed to be when we lived under the same roof. He is going to be a father in 3 months. Camille is pregnant. They asked me to be the godmother. I said yes. The baby is going to know me. The baby is going to know me as the aunt who lives in Vermont and teaches art and shows up on weekends. That is the version of me I want a child in our family to know first. I bought a small house outside the town where I teach. I used a portion of the inheritance to do it. I kept the rest invested. I am still teaching art. The teaching job is the thing my parents told me I was not supposed to need money for, because I would never make any. I am teaching it because I love it, and because I do not need the money to come from my paycheck anymore, and because I have learned that doing work you love, with money you have inherited, is not a betrayal of the work. It is the most stable foundation for it. My grandmother would have liked that. I think about her a lot. I want to tell you what I have learned because I think it may matter to somebody listening to this. Sometimes the family member who hurt you the most is also the one who is going to come back for you. Not to apologize, to show up. The apology is words, showing up is action. Theo did not apologize to me until the night at the diner, 3 years and 4 months after my birthday. The apology, when it came, was not the important thing. The important thing was the 3 years of action that came before it. The trust he had built, the money he had grown, the waiting he had done, the way he had read the things I posted about my students online just to make sure I was okay, the way he had driven past my school to see me with my own eyes. The apology was a sentence. The action was 1,000 sentences. The action was what made the apology mean anything. Some siblings spend their childhoods being weaponized against each other by parents who needed them divided. The day a sibling stops being a weapon and becomes an ally is the day a family actually begins. The family I had growing up was not a family. It was a hierarchy with people in it. My brother and I have started slowly to build the family our parents could not give us. It is small. It is 2 of us. It is 1 new baby on the way. It is a Sunday phone call. It is a brother in New York who finally figured out in a parking lot when he was 24 years old that the version of himself our parents had built was not who he wanted to be for the rest of his life. If you have a sibling who has been weaponized against you, do not give up on them yet. They may be having their own parking lot moment. They may be 3 years away from coming back. They may be 8 years away. They may not come back at all. But do not be the one who closes the door in case they do. Leave a small light on. The light is not for them exactly. It is for the version of them that has not arrived yet. I want to ask you something before you go. Tell me in the comments the moment a sibling of yours, or somebody in your family who you had stopped expecting anything from, did something small that surprised you. The moment they turned out to be on your team after all. Tell me what they did. Tell me how old you were. Tell me whether you cried the way I cried in a diner booth in Vermont last October. I want to know about the people who came back. There are more of them than we think. We just have to leave the light on long enough for the ones who are coming. I will be reading every single comment. I will see you in the next one.